Okay, last video of Unit 3, we're going to be talking about genetics, evolutionary psychology, and behavior. So let's get right to it. Members of the human family differ in personality, interest, culture, and family background, but at the same time, our shared brain architecture predisposes us to sense the world, to develop language, and experience hunger through the same mechanisms. Humans everywhere affiliate, conform, reciprocate favors, punish offenses, and grieve a child's death. Our genes in our environment contribute to our striking diversity and shared human nature. And the definition of environment is every non-genetic influence, from prenatal nutrition to the people and things around us. Behavior geneticists study our behavior, or study our differences, and aim to determine the relative importance of heredity and environment on behavior. The environment, like I said, includes every non-genetic influence from prenatal nutrition to the people and things around us. But we are going to be talking about genes right now. So every cell nucleus contains the genetic master code for the body. So within each cell are 46 chromosomes. And each chromosome has 23 donated by each, 23 chromosomes are donated by each parent. Each chromosome is composed of a coiled chain of molecule called DNA. And genes are DNA segments that, when turned on, hypothetically, either active or expressed, they provide the code for the production of protein molecules. By directing the manufacture of proteins, the approximately 30,000 genes that compose the human body determine our physical development. The genome provides the complete instructions for making an organism, consisting of all the genetic material in the organism's chromosomes. Variations at particular gene sites in the DNA define each person's uniqueness, and human traits are influenced by many genes and are interacting with the environment. Comparisons of identical twins who are genetic clones and fraternal twins who develop from separate eggs help behavior geneticists tease apart the effects of heredity and environment. On both extroversion and neuroticism, identical twins are much more similar than fraternal twins. The discovery that identical twins separated at birth show remarkable similarities also suggests genetic influence. Indeed, separated fraternal twins do not exhibit similarities comparable to those of separated identical twins. However, shared genes can translate into shared experiences. And when we're talking about twins, the University of Minnesota did some studies on identical twins that were separated at birth, and I'll give you a story. In February 1979, Jim Lewis woke up to his second wife named Betty, and he determined that this marriage would work. He made a habit of leaving love notes to Betty around the house, and he thought about his son, James Allen, and his dog, Troy. What was extraordinary about him in all these ordinary ways, however, was at the same moment there existed another man, also named Jim, for whom all these things, right down to the dog's name, were also true. And this other Jim had just happened 38 years earlier to been his womb mate. 37 days after their birth, these genetically identical twins were separated, adopted by blue-collar families, and reared with no contact or knowledge of each other's whereabouts until the day Jim Lewis received a call from his genetic clone, who, having been told he had a twin, set out to find him. So they became the first brothers that were tested by the University of Minnesota's psychologist Thomas Bouchard and his colleagues. They were given tests that measured their personality, intelligence, heart rate, and brain waves. So the Jim twins, despite 38 years of separation, were virtually as alike as the same person tested twice. Their voice intonations and inflections were so similar that hearing a playback of an earlier interview, Jim Springer guessed, "That's me," and he was wrong. It was his brother. So University of Minnesota has done some groundbreaking stuff. Genetic relatives are biological parents and siblings, and environmental relatives are adopted parents and siblings. For any given trait, we can ask whether or not adopted children are more like their biological parents who contributed their genes or their adoptive parents who contributed a home environment, which one was more influential. So the stunning findings from studies of hundreds of adopted families is that people who grow up together, whether they're biologically related or not, do not resemble one another in personality. So traits like extroversion and agreeableness, adoptees are more similar to their biological parents than to their caregiving adoptive parents. Adoption studies also enable comparisons, again, between genetic and environmental relatives, and nonetheless, environmental relatives do influence their children's attitudes, values, manners, faith, and politics. So clearly nature and nurture shape shape people's developing personality. Heritability describes the extent to which variation among members of a group can be attributed to genes. If the heritability of intelligence is 50%, this does not mean that one's intelligence is 50% genetic. Instead, it means that we can attribute to genetic influence 50% of the observed variation among people. Our genes affect how our environment reacts to and it influences us. So a good way of thinking about this is that nature enables nurture. Because of human adaptability, most psychologically interesting traits are expressed in particular environments. So in other words, genes are self-regulating. They react differently in different environments. We are all the products of interactions between our genetic predispositions and our surrounding environments. For example, a stressful environment can trigger genes that affect the production of neurotransmitters that underlie depression. Breastfeeding boosts later intelligence only for the 90% of infants with a gene that assists in breaking down fatty acids present in human milk. Similarly, a baby who is genetically predisposed to be social and easygoing may, in contrast to one who is less so, attract more affectionate and stimulating care and thus develop into a warmer and more outgoing person. Molecular geneticists study the molecular structure and function of genes. They seek to identify specific genes influencing behavior, and in labs worldwide, molecular geneticists are teaming with psychologists to identify genes that put people at risk for genetically influenced disorders. Potentially, steps may be taken to prevent problems before they happen, and with this benefit also comes risk of labeling people in ways that may lead to discrimination. Oh, I'm sorry. Prenatal screening poses hopeful possibilities, but also difficult problems as parents become able to select their children's traits. In places like China and India, where boys are highly valued, testing for an offspring's sex has enabled selective abortions, and millions of parents will select for health and perhaps for brains and beauty. However, by selecting out certain traits, we may deprive ourselves of future Handels, Van Goghs, Lincolns, Dickinsons, and all these people were troubled. So, evolutionary psychologists focus on what makes us so much alike as humans, and they study how natural selection has shaped our universal behavioral tendencies. Natural selection is something that you've learned about before, and it's a principle that among the range of inherited trait variations, those that lead to increased reproduction and survival will most likely be passed on to succeeding generations. Nature selects beneficial variations among the mutations, which are random errors in gene replication, and the new gene combinations produced at each human conception. During human ancestry, genes that enabled today's capacity to learn and adapt had survival value. Similarly, we love the taste of fats and sweets. These were once hard to come by, but once prepared our ancestors to survive famines. And this particular natural disposition is mismatched with today's junk food environment. And evolutionary success does help explain many of our similarities regardless of which culture or ethnicity you hail from. Behaviors that contribute to survival are found throughout cultures around the world. So although human differences grab our attention, our deep similarities also demand explanation. And in the big picture, our lives are remarkably alike. Take an airport, for example. an international airport. Arriving passengers are meeting their excited loved ones, and you'll see the same delighted joy in the faces of Indonesian grandmothers, Chinese children, and homecoming Dutch. Evolutionary psychologist Steven Pinker believes it's no wonder that our emotions, drives, and reasoning have common logic across cultures. And like I said before, our sweet tooth, our taste for fatty foods and sweet foods, is something, it was a genetic trait that helped us survive famines and stuff like that in ancient times. However, these have harmed us in modern times. Gender refers to the biologically and socially influenced characteristics by which people define male and female. One of the largest reported gender differences is women's greater disapproval and lesser willingness to engage in casual and uncommitted sex. In comparison to women, men think more about sex, they masturbate more often, and are more likely to initiate sex and make more sacrifices to gain sex. Evolutionary psychologists apply the principle of natural selection to explain women's more relational and men's more recreational approaches to sex. Compared with eggs, sperm are cheap. While a woman usually incubates and nurses one infant at a time, a man can spread his genes by impregnating other females. Women most often send their genes into the future by pairing wisely, and men by pairing widely. Women increase their own and children's chances of survival by searching for mates with economic resources and social status, and being attracted to healthy, fertile-appearing partners increases men's chances of spreading their genes widely. Critics argue that evolutionary psychologists start with an effect like gender sexuality difference and work backward to propose an explanation. In addition, much of who we are is not hardwired, so cultural expectations shape the genders. And still others suggest that evolutionary explanations may undercut moral responsibility. In response, evolutionary psychologists point to the explanatory power of their theoretical principles, especially those offering testable predictions. And they also note that understanding our propensities may help us overcome them. Reflections. Nature and nurture jointly form us. That is, again, we are products of natural selection and heredity, as well as cultural, family, and peer influences. But we're also open systems, and that is creators as well as creatures of our world. And we respond to the world's response to us, and the stream of our causation runs through our present choices. Our hopes, our goals, and our expectations influence our future. Our decisions today design our environments tomorrow. And Roger Sperry sees the mind and brain as a holistic system. The brain creates and controls the emergent mind, which in turn influences the brain. So I apologize for that little awkward pause earlier. I had something distracting me. So that's it for this unit. Good luck on your test, guys.